we're actually going to move on to the actual RGB mod part. So we're going to be soldering mostly to the bottom of the multi-out here. So let's go ahead and flip the board over. And this is the area we're going to be working with right here. So what I like to do is doing a dry fit first of the board. You order this kit from Voultar. It's optional that you'll get the cut to length ribbon cable, and then also the C11 ghosting capacitor fix, which we'll get to that later. So I'm going to take the Voultar RGB mod, and it just kind of fits over these pins here. And you want to do a dry fit because sometimes there's a lot of solder on these pins where you really can't get it to rest well. Yeah, see, there's so much solder on here that there's so much solder on these multi-out pins here that it's not wanting to go down. I think also part of the problem is, for some reason from the factory, I mean, this doesn't impede function, but there's no reason to do it. They bridged pins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now these are ground pins anyway, so it doesn't hurt to bridge them. But I want to clear that bridge and see if I can get a better dry fit. So to clear that bridge, I'll see if I can just get some flux and reflow it. Not having luck with that so far. So I tried to film myself using desoldering wick to remove the excess solder there, but I just couldn't get it to show up good on camera. But now I have, get into focus. It's much less solder, but still enough to fill those vias there. So go ahead and I also, by the way, I also put on, this is not strictly required because there's no components on the bottom, but I went ahead and put some Kapton tape just for peace of mind. So that should just slide right on there. You want to kind of lay as flat as possible. That's pretty good. All right, so now let's go ahead and solder all the multi-out pins here. First, I'm going to go ahead and turn my soldering iron back on because it went to sleep. And while I am waiting for that to heat up, I'm going to put some flux on those pins. And now we're just going to go and just solder to each of these. You don't want too much because you don't want it to flood down to the multi-out and bridge any pin there. You want just enough to kind of get these vias good and wetted and filled. I don't know how well this is showing up on camera. Usually don't have this much trouble with these pins. I think it's because my tip's dirty. So let me go ahead and re-tin my tip, clean that off, put some more flux on here. All right, now I'm just going to reflow these one more time because I'm not too happy with how some of those look. Go ahead and clean off the flux so we can inspect it here. So I like to spray it with isopropyl, give it some brushes, but then that just kind of loosens up the flux, and then get a rag or cloth. I'm just using some old clothes as a rag. I might want to want to go back over pin 5 there. I'm not entirely happy with the way that looks. Let's take another look here. That looks much better, and it's not sticking up too high. We got good shiny solder balls there. You touch up this last one here. Nice wetted joins there. Now you'll notice I didn't solder these last 3 pins here, here, and here. That's because there's actually no plated vias there, so there's really nothing for the solder to adhere to. So on this newest design of Voultar's board, these pins 12, 11, and 9, these 3 right here in the corner, do not need to be soldered. Okay, so next we're going to tin up our pins for RGB, C-Sync, and Luma chroma, since we're enabling S-Video as well. So I'm just going to put a little flux on there and touch my iron to the pad and just put a nice little bead of solder there. This will make things easier for when we go to add our conductors for those signals later. And Luma. Clean off the flux residue there in preparation for the conductors. So the next step, we're going to need to trim, strip and tin our 4-conductor ribbon cable. And the way Voultar has this board designed, you have your C-Sync red, green, blue, so S-RGB, and those need to be wired to these vias here. So this one is C-Sync RGB. So the idea is going to be to have the wires going from here to here across the cartridge connector. So first we need to prepare the conductors. So I've gone ahead and kind of scored in between all these wires on the ribbon cable with my hobby knife. And now what we're going to do is take our wire strippers and strip a little more than you think you're going to need, just in case. And I've got more ribbon cable if I need a longer piece. But when we tin these wires, we want to make sure that we're getting good tinning. So let's go ahead and strip these. I think this is 26 AUG ribbon cable. Yeah, right. So strip that. And finally strip this one. All right, so now we have exposed conductor. So we want to give each of these a little twist since it's stranded copper wire. So what I'm trying to do is, so hard with these big fingers.
Nice.
Trying to twist this stranded copper together so that when I flux and tin these, I'll have a more solid connection and I won't have strands of copper everywhere. So now I've got my wires stripped and twisted. So I'm going to dip these wires in a bit of Rawson paste flux and go and tin them up. So I've got the flux on there. So what I'm going to do now is bring my soldering iron back in and put a good blob of solder on the tip and just let it kind of wick up. I don't know how well it's showing up here. Let it kind of wick up to that wire. All right, so we have our wires tinned. So now we're going to try to get this on camera. I'm going to try to clip these kind of short. You only want a couple millimeters maybe. So I'm going to come in with my flush cuts or side cutters. You really don't want too much exposed here so it doesn't stick through to short out anything on the other side of the motherboard. I'm going to try to use the white wire as C-Sync. So we're gonna go ahead and try to get all these in here. I might not have gotten it twisted enough for these small holes. So the white wire is going in to C-Sync. So let me try the red wire again. I may have to come in with, may have to get a new piece of ribbon cable and try this again. Got my new spool of ribbon cable here, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of score 1, 2, 3, 4 conductors here and trim off a good piece of it. Set my roll of ribbon cable aside. Now I'm going to again score in between each of these wires with my hobby knife here, just so that it's easier to separate, so that I can strip and twist and tin these conductors. So instead of trying to twist and flux these all at once, I'm going to twist and flux each one at a time. So I'm grasping.
You still recording?
Yeah, I'm still recording. I'm trying to get it to show up on camera.
This will be a long time until I get this much.
Hold it and twist to get that stranded wire good, get a good twist on it, so that when I dip it in the flux, it doesn't want to separate like it's doing right now. All right, there we go. So now give it a dunk in the flux, another dunk for good measure. And I'm using Rawson flux for this because it'll stay put on the wire strands while I'm preparing to tin the wire. So now I'm going to load some solder onto my tip. And because I've got that flux on there, it just wants to wick that solder right up. So now I have a nice tinned conductor. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this for the other three off camera. So now I'm just going to cut these fairly short for insertion into the RGB vias. So leave just about 2 or 3 millimeters or a couple 1/16 of an inch. Let's see if we can make this work. All right. We'll go ahead and do black as our C-Sync this time. All right, that one's in. And I find these angled tweezers help with, well, let's try getting these in first. These 3 in. So let's do the RGB lines first. So there's, yeah, that's going in much more nicely. Getting those conductors, those stranded conductors, twisted good before you tin them really helps, so they can fit in these vias. Now I didn't quite get these trimmed all to the same size. May have to work this a little here. You can do this, come on. There we go. Ah, nuts. I may have trimmed that one not enough. And I know you'll fit. You try trimming that one just a little shorter so they're a bit more equal length. I think I got those. That one went in the wrong hole.
Two hours later.
So now we have our. You want this to kind of come right down on you. Oh, jeez. Okay, I think I got those finally how I want them. So now, let's make sure we have them in the right 3 holes there. And we don't.
One eternity later.
Finally got these to lay how I want them. And see, each of the conductors is in the correct vias. So the purple C-Sync gray is going to be red, the white is going to be green, and the black is going to be blue. So I'm going to bring in some no clean flux, and I'm just going to tack this into place. I just want to tack it just so it's not going to move anywhere while I actually properly solder these connections now. Okay. You touch those up with a little more flux. And a tiny bit more solder. Don't like how a couple of those are looking. You want to be careful because you don't want to burn off the you don't want to burn off all the jacketing on your cable and increase the risk that these will short. Tip and reflow these one more time. There we go. That's looking a lot better. So now what we're going to need to do is bring these over and line them up and solder them to these pads there. So I'm going to go ahead and trim and tin these tips. I accidentally clipped it a little short, so I'm going to have to try to make this work as best as I can here. I don't know that I like how much tension that's putting on there. Try this again with some more flux. Add just a little more solder to that. go. That's better. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and tin up the other tips and hopefully not get them cut too short this time. I have my other 3 conductors all stripped and tinned and ready to go. So ideally what you want to do is kind of do like a dry run fit, because you want to, essentially you want the length of the exposed wire to kind of match your solder contact here. So let's go ahead and turn that guy there. Bring some flux into our tweezers. And oh, that was not pretty. Let's try this again. Maybe I didn't put enough solder on these pads. Let me bring in some fresh solder. Let's try this one more time. We'll reflux, clean our tip. That's better. Okay. And then just rinse and repeat. There we go. Please excuse the fan noise. I had to move my equipment to another room now that my daughters were back and ready to resume their activities for the day. So before I proceed any further, since this this part of the install was a little hairy for me, I don't know why I was having so much issue with these wires. Had to wind up kind of cutting them at an angle, and this one got kind of cut short, so that's why it's kind of skewed like that. So before I proceed, I'm going to go ahead and test continuity from each pad to each wire, just to make sure I'm getting continuity through the wire with my multimeter. And I'm also going to test from each wire point to the other's wire point or pads to make sure none of these are shorted. So I've got my EE blog meter here. Yours might be different. For mine, continuity is the speaker icon with the resistance symbol omega. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in continuity mode. Again, your meter might be different. Usually there's a speaker symbol or audio symbol, since that denotes beeping when it detects continuity and no resistance. So I'm going to go ahead and touch this lead here for blue and this pad for blue. We have continuity, but we're not getting any continuity to the other pads, so that's good to see. So that means we don't have a short. So now I'm going to move on to the next one, to the white wire. Have continuity of the white pad, but not to any of the others. And finally to red, and the red pad, we have continuity there, but not to C-Sync green or blue. And we're going to test C-Sync with continuity, but it's not shorted to anything else here. And I'm also going to check these multi-out pins just to make sure they aren't shorted to each other. Okay, that wasn't a short, that was me slipping and hitting the contacts together. So I'm not getting any shorts here. only short I should get is potentially the 2 ground pins. But I'm not getting a short, so that's good. But if I test a ground, both of them test it. If I like pick like a ground plane here, both of those are toning out to ground, but they're not toning out. They're not. Oh, there we go. They should tone out to each other. Okay, because these two are ground pins, but nothing else is shorted. All right. So now we can proceed with adding S-Video. The final part of this mod is going to be to wire the S-Video pins on the bypass board to the luma and chroma signals pins on the S-RGB encoder chip, which are actually not connected to anything. The pins are there. It's just there's no traces leading out there. For whatever reason, Nintendo disabled S-Video input on the SNES Mini. So the chroma, or the color information signal for S-Video, is going to be generated at pin 12 right here. And the luma signal, which is brightness, is going to be pin 17. So it's next to this empty trace here. You can count from 13, 14, 15, where that white dot is, then 2 more, 16, 17. So it's not right perpendicular with that, but it's the one next to it, 2 over from this white dot, which is a landmark or a marker for pin number 15. So 13, 14, 15 white dot, 16, 17. So probably the best way to do this that I've seen is to add some solder to those pins, just enough to add a slight bulge, and then solder your tinned wires to that. I'm doing my best to try to get this on camera here. The angle with my phone's not that great, so I'm going to just put a couple drops of no clean flux, and let's do the chroma pin first, pin 12. There we go. Now we're going to do the luma pin. Clean my tip up a bit. Add some more flux. This is just very hard to get this on camera. Yeah, I'm going to do this off camera.
A few moments later.
All right, there we go. We got pins 17 and 12 with extra solder. So now we're going to, off camera, flux and tin some 2 conductor ribbon wire, and I'll try to get that on camera getting soldered here, but I may not be able to. So first we're going to solder the red wire that I've already pre-tinned to the chroma pin 12. So here we go. Actually, let me flux that up a bit. Alright, let's see how that looks. Focus. Focus. I had to restart with a new length of wire because I had wound up trimming it too short. And looks like we're good now. Got pin 17 and 12 wetted up, and what we're going to do now is we're going to run it across towards this pair of capacitors across the motherboard and wrap it around. And solder it to these pads here. Now remember, pin 12, which I believe I wired for chroma on the red wire. Yeah, so the red wire is chroma. So that's actually going to need to go to C. And the orange wire, pin 17, luma, needs to go to the Y pad. So I'm going to go ahead and trim up and tin the other end of these connectors and then be back to solder them to the pads. All right, now we are ready to go ahead and solder the chroma and luma pins to the mod board. I've already trimmed, tinned, and fluxed these wires. So again, luma going to pin 17 goes to Y pad, red, which goes to pin 12, chroma goes to the C pad. First, we're going to add a few drops of no clean flux. I'm going to start with the chroma pad. So I find tweezers help to kind of hold this in place. This is luma, not chroma, sorry. All right, let's see how that looks. I'm not happy with that. Let's try it again. Add some solder to that pad. Oh, I always have the hardest time with these. I don't know why. I don't know if my hands are just that unsteady or what. Added some more solder to that pad. Just put some more flux. Let's try this again. I'm still not happy with that. All right, I can live with that. So again, add some no clean flux. And get your solder pad molten. I don't like how that one turned out. Let's reflux. Clean my tip. Oh, criminy. I think a lot of my trouble is I'm trying to do this while recording it. So mad respect to those streamers and YouTubers that can do this on camera. All right, I can live with that.
You will learn to live with it. Because I can live with it. I can live with it.
Now I just need to do some cleanup. So I'm going to spritz some 91% IPA, isopropyl alcohol. And dab it with a rag. Now let's flip her over. And yeah, we got some white, definitely have some white flux residue here. So I'm gonna clean that up as well. I mean, it says no clean, but it really leaves a mess. You more or less do want to clean it, even if you're using no clean flux. Just dab that. All right, let's go ahead and put it back together for testing. Just a couple notes here about putting the heatsink back on. So I did apply a little bit of thermal compound on the back of this new 78S05 voltage regulator, just to give it better thermal conductance to the heatsink. That's not stock. It's probably a little overkill, but I figure I might as well while I'm doing it. But while you're securing these screws, they screw in from the bottom here, and you want to make sure you're not pinching the wires when you screw them in. I found the best way to go about this was to kind of run this tab here from the heatsink under the wires and then screw up into it. And that way that's giving you some good clearance around the heatsink. You could theoretically run it through here, but that I didn't want to take up too much slack by doing that. So I just ran it across the top of the heatsink. But of course the wires are already there, so I kind of just brought the heatsink in at an angle and slid that tab under the wires before screwing it back in. And I went ahead and took another shot at the, let me zoom in a little bit, another shot here. And I got what looks like a better join on these pads. I have the hardest time for some reason. I know many people make it look so easy, like Voultar, Dubes and Hauer, and some of these other YouTubers that do this modding. I guess my hands aren't as steady. I have a hard time getting that wire to stay put while the pool goes liquid. So, but anyway, I'm happy with that. So let's go ahead and do some continuity testing. First, let's test continuity from the pin 12 wire, which is chroma. So I'm gonna hold my probe there, and I'm gonna try to keep it in place while I flip it around. And let's make sure I have continuity to the chroma pad here. There we go. All right, so we got continuity to chroma. It's not bridged to luma. So now I'm going to do the pin 17 wire for luma. Make sure that's not bridged to chroma, and it's not. There we go. Sorry for the blurry shot. Not bridged. Got toning to luma to pin 17. So, all right, let's go ahead and reassemble. All right, let's go ahead and we have the bottom case for the Super Nintendo Jr. And just kind of bring that in, make sure it's your controller port's seated there, and make sure your multi-out is seated there. Let's go ahead and screw everything back up here. I like to, when I'm reassembling, start with the longer 3 silver pins. So let's do the one in the multi-out and proceed to drop it. Let's try this again with the multi-out pin. So, and when you're screwing these back in, kind of counter thread it, so gently turn left till you hear it pop and pop down. I'll do it one more time. There it goes. I don't know if it picked it up. You'll feel it and also hear it. That means you've backed it out and you're back at the beginning of the thread. That way when you're screwing into the plastic, you're not cutting new thread. So let's do the cartridge slot screws. I'm not going to fully reassemble this for testing. I just want to get it so it's not going to wiggle around when I put a cartridge in to test it. So do that one. So I'm probably just going to do these silver screws and just pop the heat shield on, or the RF shield on for the testing. I dropped my other screw there. Now the other cartridge screw. So these are the 3 silver screws. You don't want to go overly tight, just kind of finger tight on those. Just want to make sure they're good and finger tight. All right, so that motherboard's not going to go anywhere. Let's go ahead and put the RF shield back on. Probably not strictly needed for testing, but I'm just going to put it on anyway. And remember, these teeth here kind of go into these slots on the cartridge connector, and you just want to push it down, making sure you've got these little plastic tabs. There we go. See, I didn't have it engaged all the way on the left side there. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then make sure it's seated back there against the cartridge slot. So now I need to go find a TV or monitor that's got S-video. I'm going to test that first, and then go to my main CRT setup to test RGB with some HD Retrovision component cables. I had to take the motherboard back out because I totally forgot that I was going to go ahead and do the C11 ghosting capacitor fix. So to give you an idea how tiny this capacitor is, let me zoom in. C11, this right here, needs to be replaced with a slightly different value, or different value. Voultar and some other people discovered that replacing this ceramic capacitor with a different value one can eliminate what's called a ghosting issue. You might see it referred to as a C11 ghosting issue. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that, but this is the tip of an X-Acto knife just to give you an idea of just how tiny this is. Getting the capacitor off is the easy part. That's just flooding it with solder, but getting the replacement, holding it still, definitely requires patience and tweezers and good techniques. So first we're going to go ahead and flood it off. All right, so let's go ahead and remove C11. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I try to keep it intact and set it aside in case I lose the new C11 capacitor. So what I find is the best way to get this off is to just kind of flood it off. I saw this technique being used by Voultar on his video, and it works pretty well for removing surface mount components. So turn my iron down just a little bit. I'm going to add some flux and some fresh solder to both ends here. You got to be very careful because there's other components that you need to preserve. And now I'm just going to kind of go back and forth, adding solder to both sides of C11. All right, and I'm going to try and set that aside on my tray here. So let me go ahead and clean up these pads with some braid. All right, so let's bring in some more flux and just clean up these C11 pads with some desoldering braid. So I'm going to flux the braid too. And you're going to be very careful because you only want to remove the solder on the C11 pads. Let's try and get a little bit more of it off here. So we got most of the solder off of C11. So what I'm going to do now is reflux it, and I'm going to tin one side of it. Just tin one pad there. Just a little bit more. I don't know how well that's coming up there. But you notice I've only got the one side there. And the idea is going to be to carefully take the new C11 capacitor, and they're not polarized. These ceramic ones are not polarized, thankfully, so you don't have to worry about which side goes where. But you want to, with some tweezers, steady as you can, hold the capacitor like this and heat up the one side, and then kind of touch it there and let it and get it as flat as you can. Then once it's tacked in place, then come back and solder the other side. I cannot stress enough just how tiny this component is here. All right, here goes nothing. So I'm going to add some more flux to the C11 pads. Now I'm going to add a little bit more flux and solder up. Now that's being held in place. And I'll do the other pad. Just get it good and clean and thoroughly wetted. Then we'll do a capacitance test. That looks good. Let's take a closer look here. Got a good wetted joint on both sides. Let's go and measure capacitance. Make sure when I did capacitance testing on C11, I was getting a really weird number, like 1700 nanofarads. But then I realized it's in circuit, so I'm not going to get necessarily an accurate reading. So instead, what I did, rather than take it out of circuit, was I just tested continuity. I pulled up the schematic, and this leg of C11 traces to plus 5 volts. And if you can kind of see the trace go to this pin. So I tested continuity. I did it off camera because my phone was just getting in the way. But this side of C11 is a plus 5 volt connection, and I just found that to be a good test point. That's one of the pins on the reset switch. The other end's a little trickier. So the schematic says this leg of C11 actually goes to pin 154 on the CPU. I'll show you where that is. So if I zoom back out, if I flip the board over, this large chip here on the one chips and the minis, SCPU-N, that's the CPU. So pin 154 is going to be, count from 160, 159, 58, let me try again, 159, 58, 57, 56, 55. 54 is this pin, let me try to zoom in here. 54 is going to be this pin right here. Let me make sure I count it one more time. 59, 58, 57, 56, 55, 54. So 54 is this pin right below this empty via. That should go to that other end of C11. So I tested that and got continuity to the other pad of C11. So my join's good there. I did look up the value. I should have tested it while it was out of circuit, but if you're going to replace C11, use a 470 nanofarad ceramic capacitor. And depending on, that could be a 603 package or 805 package size, depending on whether you're doing this on the one chip fat SNES or the mini. On the mini, I believe it's a 603, and on the fat SNES it's 805. But again, the value is the same, 470 nanofarads. So you can get those as part of the kit from Voultar. You can order them individually from Console 5, or you can source it yourself from your favorite parts vendor like DigiKey or Mouser. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this for testing S-Video now. Before I test S-Video, I wanted to highlight a new power supply I got for my Super Nintendo. A lot of my other retro systems. I was clued into these by Firebrand X, who does great work for the retro community and puts out a lot of great information. He put together a list of quality switching mode power supplies that take advantage of modern advancements in power supply technology and are quite efficient. They're certified safe to use, very high quality power supplies. You can get them from Mouse or DigiKey or from Castlemania. Just one thing to note though, so the one that he recommends, and I'll link his page in the description, but he recommends this WSU 090-2000R, which is center negative, 9 volt, 2 amp power supply for the Super Nintendo, but the Super Nintendo uses a very non-standard barrel size connector. So to show you, this is the standard end of that power supply, and you have to buy an adapter to use these with Super Nintendo. So I'm going to try to show it side by side here. So the one on the right with the blue tip, that's the Super Nintendo barrel plug. So I bought this power supply from Mouser. It just plugs into this adapter that I got from Console 5 that just adapts the barrel size for the Super Nintendo's unique power connector. Got S-Video cable and power hooked up. S-Video going to this, one of the few TVs I have that has an S-Video input. But before I fired it up with my copy of Mario All-Stars and Mario World, I wanted to show you how to use this. The console cleaner from 1UP Cards. Their 1UP cards are great for cleaning consoles, but for actually cleaning the cartridge pins, they make these. So you just kind of push it in there, and that snapping is from the plastic on this. It's not from the Super Nintendo. You just kind of push it in and out a couple times. There's a little like cleaner that kind of cleans the pins a little bit there. All right, let's go ahead and for the moment of truth, put in Mario All-Stars and let's see if it works. So turn on our TV, wait a moment. All right, set to HDMI. So we're gonna set it to S-Video. All right, and turn it on. Awesome. Got working S-Video restored. Now, this is not going to look the greatest because this small HD TV is interpreting the 240p signal as 480i. I'm going to turn this. Oh. What I meant to say was I'm going to turn the volume down on this. But this TV is going to interpret the 240p signal as 480i and try and do some deinterlacing with it. But colors look good. I'm pretty happy with S-Video. Now let's test RGB. Okay, we got it hooked up to my RGB component Extron switcher. So got the HD Retrovision cables and the OEM power supply, which I'm going to replace with the Triad once I get labels made to put on all my Triad bricks. So let's go ahead and tie SNES to the output. My CRT is set to component. And now for the moment of truth. Okay, that is way too red.
Well, duh.
So I need to do some troubleshooting and figure out what I wired up wrong. Well, after it ran for a bit, the colors kind of restored on their own. The black and white strobing is just an effect of recording a CRT on my iPhone, and that's just the intro screen looping again. So the colors look fine now. I'm not sure what was going on there. I'm going to leave it running for a bit, do a burn-in test, and make sure everything's okay. All right, so I've got her buttoned up after some burn-in testing, and I even had the suggestion of Fraggle Rock of Fraggle Tech and Rain-X and some of the other good Discord buddies over on Dubes and Howard's Discord. They suggested that maybe one of the caps on the Voultar board might be a little wonky on the RGB lines. So just to test that, at their suggestion, I turned off the system, unplugged it, toggled the power switch to drain the capacitor's of any charge, and then I popped in another game, Rockman X, and it looked fine right from the get-go. So I'm chalking it up to just a transient issue. maybe one of those capacitors just needed a little extra time to charge up. But consider this mod complete. Thank you for watching, and I'll leave you with the obligatory crispy-ass RGB still shot from Rockman X, or as he was known here in the US, Mega Man X. Thanks, and I hope you have a good day. To steal a line from SNES Drunk, please don't sue me.